When I was in my senior year of high school, 17 years old, all that was on my and my friends' minds were girls. There was one girl in particular in my physics class that I was really into. Her name was Tiffany. Some guys called her Crazy Tiff because she was super hot, but also apparently really crazy according to her exes. That's irrelevant to this story though. Basically, my best friend CJ managed to get one of Tiffany's best friends, Gianna, to agree to come hang out at some beach with him and I that night since it was a Friday and the weather was warm. The best part, Tiffany agreed to come with. This was it, my big chance with Crazy Tiff. CJ pulled up to my house at 10 o'clock that night. I hopped in shotgun and we went to pick up Tiffany and Gianna. On our way there, we agreed our first priority was getting me alone with Tiffany and CJ getting alone with Gianna. I was extremely nervous, but when Tiffany and Gianna got in the car, things were actually going pretty smoothly. CJ and I managed to make them laugh a bunch of times. By the time we got to the beach, I was confident Tiffany and I would vibe really well alone. I don't remember the tiny details of what happened after we stepped out of the car and onto the dunes, but I do remember the beach being completely void of any other people, and CJ somehow managed to go off alone with Gianna into the darkness after a few minutes, just like we planned. Tiffany and I took a walk down to the water and wet our feet and whatnot. Then we just laid in the sand and talked for a while. Things were going smoothly until Tiffany pointed out to the ocean. "What is that?" she said. I looked to where she was pointing but didn't see anything. I was laughing at her apparent delusion and got up to go closer to the water in hopes of maybe seeing what she saw. My feet touched the cold water, and that's when I was close enough to see it. There was a long, vertically standing object in the water. I inched a little closer and saw it move. I jumped out of the water and ran back to Tiffany. "It's a person," I said quietly to her. It was truly bizarre, the fact that anyone would be in the freezing cold water at this hour. Tiffany wanted to move because she was uncomfortable, and it seemed like whoever it was just watching us. Somehow it just felt like that. So we took a walk further down the beach until we thought we had privacy. We sat back down on the beach with nothing but the sound of the ocean waves in our voices. But Tiffany was once again the one to point out something. "Do you hear that?" she asked me. I did kind of hear it. It was like a smaller kind of splashing sound, but it stopped just as soon as it started. We looked out to the ocean, and I heard Tiffany gasp. The guy was out there again. I was going to go out there and tell him to back off, but Tiffany told me let's just go. Low-key, I was hoping she would. I just wanted to look tough in front of her. We got back to the car. CJ and Gianna weren't back yet. Suddenly, my phone started blowing up with texts, all from CJ. Apparently, he'd been texting me in some kind of panic the whole time we were on the beach, and I guess I didn't have reception out by the water. He texted me first saying, "Dude, some weird guy is in the water watching us." And then, "Yo, some weird deformed looking guy is stalking us. Get to the car now." 5 minutes later, he sent a couple other texts, basically panicking over being followed by something in the dark. Keyword something, not someone, something. His second to last text said he was coming to look for us and to answer when I got this. His last text was, "We're on our way back to the car now, get there." He also tried calling me 3 times apparently. I called him back at once and he picked up right away out of breath, not even letting me speak. All he asked was if we were at the car, and I said yes. He said good, stay right there, and hung up the phone. Less than 30 seconds later, Gianna and CJ came out of the surrounding darkness next to the Jeep. He explained the best he could while trying to catch his breath that some deformed-looking creature walking on 2 legs was following them. I didn't know whether to laugh at what he said or not. I told him about how we saw someone in the water too. He asked me to describe what it looked like. I kept getting confused by his way of describing the person, as if they were a creature. I told him it looked like a really tall, lanky person standing in the water. He said he got a chance to get a closer look at it, and it was some kind of deformed humanoid thing. Tiffany and I looked at each other, and now we kind of nervously laughed. What he was saying was just too bizarre, but I think parts of both of us took him seriously. Gianna vouched for what he was saying. That scream made us all jump into the car. It was some kind of half-human, half-demonic kind of screaming. I can't describe it, you just have to hear it. Needless to say, we were all frantic in the car, asking CJ questions mainly. But closer to the end of the ride, we all grew silent. I guess we were all just lost in our thoughts about what just happened. To give you an idea of how quickly all this happened, we were on the dunes for about half an hour. After I heard that sound, that scream, I did start to believe CJ partially, but I still feel like what I saw in the ocean was a person. But CJ's way of describing who, or what was following him as some kind of deformed humanoid thing on the beach is what still freaks me out the most. Our old town in Florida was right by a bunch of different beaches. My sisters and I would frequently go to the beach during the sunset hours because less people were there and the views were always beautiful. Sometimes we'd play volleyball, sometimes we'd go in the water, and sometimes we'd just lay in the sand. My youngest sister Ksenia, who was 13 years old, wanted to go in the water one night. The sun was setting and it was getting dark out, so as the older brother and basically the supervisor, I told her to be back in 10 minutes. She ran into the water, and after watching her for about a minute, I looked down at my phone. My other sister, who was 16 years old, wanted to play volleyball. I was up for it. There was a volleyball net and a poorly inflated volleyball sitting next to it. It was good enough, though. We made do with it. When I looked away from the volleyball net, I couldn't see Ksenia. I looked every possible direction she could have gone in the water. I did not see her. It was getting darker and harder to see. I ran to the water to try and find Ksenia. I ran into the water, and when I couldn't run anymore, I swam. She wasn't in the water anywhere, though. But I saw a boat nearby. A big, luxurious boat, close enough to swim over to. It took me a couple minutes, but I got there. I hoisted myself up onto the bow, off some tiny step ladder, and I heard laughing below deck. There was a hatch door that was opened, and there were lights on down there. I called out for help. Then there was silence. I called out that I was looking for my sister. Then I heard Ksenia's voice from below the deck. She called out my name. I hurried down the stairs into the cabin to see Ksenia sitting on a bed with a Coke in her hand. Further down the cabin were two grown-ass men sitting opposite each other, looking at me. I grabbed Ksenia into my arms, and one of the men said with a smile that I have a very nice sister. The other man seemed to catch on to my suspicion right away and claimed that the two of them were just offering to give her a ride and some snacks because they saw her all alone in the water. I didn't even say a word to them. One of them asked if we needed a ride back to shore. I didn't answer. I told Ksenia to swim back to the beach with me. We got back to shore in a couple minutes, and the boat was far gone into the sunset. I brought my two sisters home and had my dad figure out what he should do. First of all, he was mad at me for not getting details of the boat or the men's faces, and he was right. My dad punished Ksenia and prohibited her from going to the beach past sunrise from there on out. I have a beach house in Florida that I tend to visit with my girlfriend in the colder months up north. In the warmer months, we'd still visit occasionally, but nowhere near as much since there wasn't as much of a need to. It was early February, freezing up in Connecticut, so my girlfriend and I took a trip down to Florida to visit the beach house. By the time we actually got to the house after the day-and-a-half drive, it was starting to get dark out. It was actually a long month and a half since I'd been there last at the time. The electricity, the water, and everything was already on since it was wintertime, and I kept everything on during the winter season due to our frequent visits. So all we had to do when we arrived to the house was unpack, take a couple lounge chairs, and walk 20 seconds onto the beach and take a nap. We didn't even check out any of the other rooms because we were so drained. We lounged on the beach until it got really dark. Then my girlfriend tapped my shoulder. I looked up at her, and she asked if I left that light on. I turned to the house and saw one of the upstairs lights on. Not just that, but at one of the windows in that room, there was a shadow outline behind the partially opened curtains. I looked at my girlfriend and she looked at me, and I think it sunk into both of us that someone was in that room at that window. I told her to wait there. I ran to the house as fast as I could. When I got to the back doors, when I started being quiet, I slid it open and shut quietly, and being that I was barefoot made tiptoeing a bit easier. I made it to the stairway and then halfway out the stairs before I heard a door shut upstairs. I went up the remaining stairs a bit quicker now and saw that the door to the room that had the light on was open, but the lights were off now. I went into the room which had the light on not even 2 minutes ago. I kept the light off though. Instead, I just used the flashlight which I had on the shelf ledge upstairs. Then I remembered the closet door. It was shut. That must have been the door I heard close, I figured. I shut off the flashlight as I tiptoed to the door of the closet and slowly put my ear up to it to listen. There was nothing but silence in the room and on the other side of the closet door. I wasn't sure what was going to happen when I opened that door, if someone was in fact on the other side, but I had to confront this. I grabbed the 2 little knobs and finally brought myself to yank the doors open, but it was empty in there, or at least from what I could tell, it was dark. I grabbed my flashlight and switched it on, and yep, the closet was empty, but a creak in the floorboards outside of the room caught my attention. I ran into the hall expecting to see the intruder, but no, it was just my girlfriend. I got mad at her for coming into the house, even though I told her to stay put. But now that she was there, I told her to help search the upstairs. We looked around in all 3 bedrooms upstairs, all the closets, and the bathroom, but there was no one. Then we checked the downstairs. Every room, every closet. No one. We had to figure that whoever was in the house somehow escaped, so we locked all the doors and looked around the house for any signs of breaking and entering or stolen items. But there was neither of that. So we brushed up and went to bed since we were exhausted. However, that night before we could even fall asleep, there was a click under our bed. I asked my girlfriend if she could hear that. She said yes. I got out from under the bed and got down on my knees. When my face got to the ground level giving me a view under the bed, I could see the intruder laying under our bed. I looked at him face to face before he crawled out and made a break for the front door. I couldn't catch him once he got outside because I was still barefoot. I also didn't get a very good look at his face because we only looked at each other for about a second. We once again searched the whole house to see what he could have stolen, but surprisingly, nothing was stolen. We couldn't even figure out how he broke in. We didn't call the cops. We simply moved on and did our best to enjoy the rest of our vacation. Spring break 2016. 3 friends and I were a little too late to book a worthwhile spring break trip like in Cancun or Miami or something like that, so we did what we thought was the next best thing. We Airbnb'd a beach house in Georgia for a good price last minute. The landlord left the key hidden in a plant on the front stoop. As soon as I unlocked the door and we stepped into the home, we could all agree there was a funky smell in the house. It wasn't necessarily a bad smell. It was just weird. The house was big though. It had a big first floor and huge second floor with 4 bedrooms. We all had claim to our own room. We got there early in the day, so the sun was still out and strong. The 3 others, who I guess I'll introduce now, Todd, Nate, and Michael, were outside hanging on the beach. I went inside to look for a volleyball because the landlord said there were a bunch of sports equipment in one of the upstairs closets. There was only one closet upstairs though, so I checked it, and inside of it were things like badminton rackets, baseball gloves, frisbees, and a volleyball, exactly where the woman had described. When I shut the closet door, however, I realized the door to my bedroom was open. I had 100% closed it not even 15 minutes before. I went outside to ask my friends which of them went in my room. I didn't make a big deal about it, but I had to ask because I found that to be a little annoying. They all claimed they didn't go in my room, so I moved past it. I wasn't going to let it bother me too much. When the sun went down, we all got dressed to go to nearby clubs, which were supposed to be crowded due to spring break. I split off a bunch of times to get drinks from the bartender that I found cute, thinking somehow I'd have a chance with her. Of course, I was just acting like a drunk idiot. I guess I'd been mixing my drinks a little too much because at some point I started feeling really sick. The house was walking distance from the club I was in, so I decided I'd walk to the house and see the rest of them tomorrow. When I got back to the front door, I put the key in the mailbox as I told my friends I'd do if I left early. I made sure to lock the door behind me, and if any of my friends would come back, I'd assume they'd remember what I said. I went straight to the bathroom upstairs, where I sat by the toilet waiting to puke. My head was spinning, but I just couldn't sum up the urge to finally puke. As I was sitting on the bathroom floor, I heard something outside, like something being dropped on the floor in one of the nearby bedrooms. I stood up and peeked outside. I stepped into the center hallway and noticed that the door to the room that Todd had claimed was cracked open. There was a small nightlight on in there, and as I walked closer to the door, I noticed someone sitting on the bed. They were just sitting on the edge of the bed facing a wall. Was it Todd? I honestly couldn't tell at that point. I was only peeking through a tiny crack in the door. It really didn't look like Todd though, and how would he have gotten in before me without the key? In a split second, my heart started racing twice as fast as I was looking at someone who I started to believe wasn't Todd. I started backing away slowly, and of course, there was the slightest crack in the wood floor. The person sitting on the bed clicked their head to the left to face the door, and even through that tiny crack, I felt as if he was looking at me. It wasn't Todd. It was some random man who looked to be about 40. I ran to the bathroom and locked the door, not trying to be quiet anymore. I tried calling my friend Todd, and as it was ringing, I saw the doorknob to the bathroom door pressed down slightly. The man on the other end was trying to open the door, but of course I locked it. I heard footsteps walking away until they faded away completely. Todd didn't pick up the phone, so I called the landlord. She didn't pick up either, so I finally called 911. I asked them to send a police officer because there was someone who wasn't supposed to be in the house. A police car came to the house within a few minutes, and I ran to the front door to answer it, asking the officer to look around the house with me. It wasn't a huge house overall. The first floor was a quick search, under the couches, in the closets, in the cabinets. Then we went upstairs, checking all the bedrooms, under the beds, and those closets. It seemed clear. He made me fill out some report form and he was on his way. I still locked myself in the bathroom until my friends rang the bell. With all of them back, I finally felt safe, and when I told them what happened, they were all in shock. The next day, I called the landlord and told her, and she sounded very distraught after I described the man. She sounded confident that her crazy ex-boyfriend had somehow broken into the house and was expecting to find her there. It turned out the room Todd had claimed used to be the bedroom she and her ex would share. She offered to refund me and let us go home if we didn't feel safe. Surprisingly, we agreed to stay the full week though, and actually nothing happened for the rest of the week. I feel like maybe the man figured that she had moved out, but I do wonder how things would have played out if she was home. My friends and I were on spring break in Miami. Late at night after hitting the clubs, we were walking back to the hotel. I guess we left super late because I don't remember seeing any people walking around anywhere besides the three of us. Then, a black car with tinted windows and blasting music came driving down the street. It slowed down when it came closer to us, and when we passed it, it stopped on the side of the road. I told my friends, "Don't look back, just keep walking." We came to an alleyway that we could cut across to get to our hotel, so we took it. As the three of us were halfway down the alleyway, we literally saw shadows of people behind us on the ground, exposed by an overhead alleyway light. We turned, and there were 3 guys walking behind us. I whispered at my friends to pick up the pace. We all knew it without saying it that those guys were most likely the ones in that black car. My 2 friends were wearing heels, so trying to run wouldn't exactly work. One of the guys called out to us to stop. That only made us go even faster. The next thing we knew, one of them was grabbing my shoulder and forcing me to stop. My friend Gina screamed so loud it could probably be heard for a mile. I screamed in a panic too, as I hit the guy with my bag repeatedly. A couple other guys came in response to the commotion from the opposite end of the alleyway and told the 3 guys to back off. The 3 seemed to realize the fight wasn't worth it and walked away. I'd never been so happy to be white-knighted in my life. The 2 guys who saved us tried escorting us back to our hotel, but we were close enough now, and we wanted nothing to do with guys we didn't know at that point. We made it safely back and went home the next morning. For spring break, I went somewhere most college students don't go for that oh-so-coveted week of the year. I went snowboarding in Colorado. My friend Kevin has a house there, so I took a flight with him and we took an Uber to his house. It was a lot of uphill driving through the snowy mountains of Colorado that I honestly can't even name. Kevin's family is loaded, so they have houses in multiple states. We pulled up to a huge property. Snow was covering everything, so I couldn't see anything but his house really. We didn't plan on snowboarding that day, as the sun was already going down and we had 2 long days ahead of us anyway. Kevin had to unlock everything in the house. It had been a month since he had come last. Kevin made a couple frozen pizzas that were left in the freezer, and we ate those for dinner. The rest of the night, we just drank and played video games. The house had a beautiful main floor that sat with the ground level outside. Kevin didn't keep any of the blinds shut because he said the closest neighbor was about half a mile away. It was definitely a pretty private property. That's why when we both heard a thump at the window, it was that much more bone-chilling. Both our heads jolted to the window like an animal that just heard a predator approaching. We paused the game and walked over to the window that thump just came from. Of course, we couldn't see anything outside because it was pitch black and snowing outside. But we did, however, see a distinct handprint on the glass that came from the other side. Needless to say, we were both spooked. Kevin wanted to go out there with a couple batons that his dad kept under his bed upstairs. I told him that's a stupid idea, but he seemed more angry than anything at this point that someone would trespass on his property and invade our privacy like that, so he convinced me to go with him. We threw back on our coats and boots, and into the snow we went. I followed him since he was holding the lantern. Yes, he had a lantern instead of a flashlight. We went to the side of his house. I found myself almost slipping and falling, walking the slight uphill several times. He turned on a light on the side of his house, which lit up the area by the window where we heard the thump. If our suspicion of being watched wasn't already confirmed, then it was when we saw the 2-way footsteps in the snow leading to and from the window. We started to follow them. They led into a small patch of woods, and we continued to follow. At this point, I asked Kevin if we should just forget about it. He didn't even answer me, so I knew to shut up. The footsteps left the small patch of woods and entered a clearing. Kevin stopped me and muttered, "What the fuck is that?" In the very near distance, there appeared to be these identical objects spaced out evenly. There were 4 of them. They stood tall like a person. Kevin took a few more steps forward, leaned his upper body in to take a closer look, I guess, then turned to me and said, "Let's get the fuck out of here." I hurried back with him, asking what he thinks those things were. He said, "I don't know, but they look like human silhouettes strung up on some kind of sticks." The words that came out of his mouth shook me. I never felt more relieved than when we got back to his house. This time he shut every blind in the house and double-checked all the doors. The next morning, first thing we did was walk back over to that clearing. We walked around it for about 10 minutes, searching. We didn't find any bodies or anything like that, but we did find 4 big wooden poles almost identical in size. We had zero explanation for this whole scenario. It was bizarre and it was downright disturbing. We had to debate whether to even go snowboarding that day, and we did. But I can't say I wasn't thinking about what we saw the night before the entire day. Last year I went to Miami for spring break. A few days before I went, I had a horrible dream. I was playing video games in my basement when I heard a noise come from a closet. I walked over to the closet and opened it, and quite simply there was a man with a distinct face I remember vividly in my head, just standing in there. It was like my brain playing a jump scare on me in my dream, because I woke up with my heart racing. Well, fast forward our first day on spring break in Miami. We were on South Beach and there were thousands of people. In fact, you could hardly walk. I was with my friends, of course, who were probably having more fun than me since I'm not the biggest fan of crowds. All I saw around me besides my friends were unfamiliar faces, until I saw this one guy, not dancing, not moving, just standing behind a couple people, but looking at me. I made eye contact with him for maybe 3 seconds before looking away and moving closer to my friends. I told one of my friends that some older man was just staring at me like a creep. When we looked at where he was standing, he was gone. The 5 of us migrated closer to the water and music, where the crowd got even thicker and the people seemed to get drunker. I was looking around when once again, I saw that man blending in with the crowd, but just looking at me. I looked at him for a few seconds again. I grabbed my friend Trish and pointed at the man and said, "That guy keeps looking at me." She said, "Just ignore it," and she went back to dancing. I started getting this sickly feeling in my stomach about it, so I ran through the crowd and looked back every few seconds. I knew I'd seen that man's face before, but I couldn't put my finger on where just yet. I made it through the crowd and got back to the hotel room, where I sat on the bed with my hand on my head, gathering my thoughts. Then it hit me, and I felt like throwing up when I realized it. It was the man from my dream, the man who was in the closet. I texted my friend Trish and waited a few minutes for her to answer. She said she didn't see who I was pointing at earlier. She just thought I should ignore whoever it was. I went back out there and didn't see the man again, but I swear this is something that actually happened to me, and I still don't know how to explain it. I got plenty of sleep. I don't think I could have hallucinated seeing that man. But how could I see a man who had literally been in a dream I had a couple nights before? It is easily the scariest and most unreal thing that's ever happened to me in my life. This video's theme is restaurant stories because of today's sponsor, Factor 75, which is a service that lets you skip all the shopping, cooking, and cleaning by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. Factor's meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy, then get back to your daily routine. And if you're looking for calorie-conscious options during the busy fall season, you can try delicious, dietitian-approved Calorie Smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. Factor also offers Gourmet Plus meals as part of your weekly options, which is perfect if you're craving something a little more special with your meal plan. With Gourmet Plus meals, you'll get a side of premium produce like broccoli and broccolini to go along with your choice of protein. And keep an eye out for Surf and Turf meal options coming soon. I personally love to cook, but sometimes finding the time to cook and food shop is a luxury. So for me, Factor has made life easier and gives me more time to do other things and stick to my goals. If you're interested, head to factor75.com or click the link in the description and use code NIGHTMARE50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. When I was 25, I went on a solo trip to Rio de Janeiro. My favorite DJ would be there that weekend, and I always wanted to go anyway. I've traveled solo many times in my life and never had any issues. Airbnbs aren't expensive a little outside of the city, and the one I was staying at was very nice and comfortable. It was its own little one-floor house, but the whole inside was very modern and clean. The Friday that I landed, I unpacked at the Airbnb, grabbed dinner, and went to the rooftop venue where the DJ would be performing. The first day and night all went well, and I met some really cool people at the rooftop. James, Ethan, and Jess. Ethan and Jess were dating. James, I guess, was third wheeling on the trip. The next day, I met up with them as they were also on a trip here. We got brunch together, then we checked out some of the sights together, like the Christ Redeemer and Sugarloaf Mountain, and then we hit the beaches. Unfortunately, they had tickets that they had already bought to another show that night, which I couldn't go to, so I was back to my solo ventures, which was fine. I still found things to do. Eventually, when I was hungry, I walked back in the direction of the Airbnb towards the outside of the city. On the way back, I stopped at a restaurant I found. I can speak a little Portuguese, but I'm by no means fluent, so I tried to keep to places where people seemed to speak English while I was alone. The menu on the window had some English writing, so I went inside. This restaurant was kind of small and dark. A lot of the restaurants in the area were expensive, but this one seemed affordable, so I stayed. The dining space was very long and narrow. It wasn't really busy. There were a few people sat further down at a couple tables. Then there was a man seated at a table basically next to mine. He was about 50. I wondered if he was another tourist. He and I were the only two people seated alone in here. The server came over and initially spoke in Portuguese, and I asked in Portuguese if he speaks English, and he said yes. From there on, I ordered in English. I noticed the man at the other table, looking over, watching as I ordered. It was kind of weird. When the server walked away after taking my order, the man said in English with a Portuguese accent that my Portuguese sounded good. I said thank you, and he started talking to me in Portuguese, as if giving me a lesson. I think he thought he was coming off as charming, but it was annoying and creepy. I kept looking down at my phone to act distracted, but he'd keep talking to me, both in English and in Portuguese. I'd humor him to be nice and not create awkwardness, and I tried my best to converse with him in Portuguese, as he'd correct my mistakes while trying to speak. The conversation was basically where I'm from, why I'm here, what I did today, and where I'm staying. I kinda just made up that I'm staying with a friend. What really creeped me out was when he told me how sexy I am when I talk in Portuguese. I was hoping he was leaving soon, but a part of me died inside when I saw the waiter bring him his food. Luckily, my food didn't take long. I got some pork stew dish. The man asked how it was. I told him fine. He stopped talking as much now that he was eating, thank God. I ate quickly. When I was done, I hurriedly asked for the check just because I didn't want to converse with this man anymore. The man also asked for the check right after I did, which I found so annoying and strange. He wasn't even done eating. Once I paid, I got up and walked out. The man said something in Portuguese, but all I said was bye and kept walking. It was dark out now, and the streets were a little less lively. I was walking for a while when I came to an intersection. While waiting to cross, I noticed the man from the restaurant across the street. He was definitely looking at me, but looked away the opposite direction when I noticed him. Maybe he had to walk the same way. It wasn't that unlikely. I continued to walk back, and as I was getting closer, I kept turning back just to see if he was still in sight. He wasn't. I arrived to the Airbnb. I got to the front door and looked around one more time, and I noticed way down the block, that man standing on the corner by the intersection. He was staring in this direction. I felt my heart drop. He was following me. I let myself inside the house and locked the door. Then I closed all the blinds. Now he knew where I was staying. I panicked and called my dad and told him. He told me to just be alert and make sure everything is locked and to maybe keep a knife by me. It was a Saturday night and my flight wasn't until late the next day, so I did want to go out. Eventually, I called an Uber to a bar in the downtown area, and I went to a venue having a house music night. I was there for maybe a couple hours before calling an Uber back to the Airbnb. When I got back, I let myself into the house kind of drunk. I sat down on the couch just to relax for a bit, but I noticed something. I heard the sound of the outside, and then I saw the blinds to one of the windows blowing from the breeze. The window in the kitchen was open. I had all the windows shut because the air conditioning was running. I immediately knew to get up and leave the house quickly. I called the emergency number and did my best to articulate to the operator in Portuguese that there was a home break-in. The police showed up in a matter of minutes, and I came out from behind the bush I was hiding in across the street when they did.
One of the police officers did speak a little bit of English, so I was able to tell him that the window was opened and I was being followed earlier. The police entered the house and yelled things I didn't understand. The moment I saw them walking outside with a man from the restaurant in handcuffs was the most shocking moment of my life. The mix of emotions I felt, disbelief yet relief, but also horrified. If I hadn't called the cops, if I had gone into the bedroom where he was probably hiding, I didn't even want to think about it. He was taken away, and I never had to see his ugly, creepy face again. I'm glad he was stupid enough to not close the window behind him. I should have listened to my dad and locked all the windows as well. I just never imagined he would actually climb through one, though. I left the next day and haven't returned to Brazil since. It was the holidays. Most of my friends were away, so I had decided to look for a part-time job to earn a bit of money. After waiting around for about a week, I finally got a call from a nearby restaurant asking me to come in for a trial. I had a fair bit of waitering experience, so I wasn't too surprised when the owner offered me the position. The place had a really creepy atmosphere to it. It was small, dimly lit, and every so often, a terrible smell would circulate through the air. It wasn't somewhere I would have usually gone for, but I needed the money and kept reminding myself that I'd only be here until college started back up. Anyway, it was around 10 p.m., and I was out the front by myself, cleaning the cutlery while I waited for the last table to leave. It was a table of 4 big guys. They were pretty rough looking. In fact, if I passed them on the street, I would have assumed they were homeless. Half an hour passed, and they finally got up to leave. I smiled as one of them came to the register to pay. "That's $42.50 altogether," I said. He immediately handed over a bunch of crinkled notes with a big grin on his face. Unfortunately, I had seen this kind of look before, and braced myself for the cheesy pickup line. He said to me, "You doing anything tonight, cutie?" bringing himself closer to the register. "Thank you, have a good night," I replied, trying to make it clear that I was not interested. He laughed and walked out the door, mumbling something under his breath as he went. As soon as he was out of sight, I quickly cleared the dishes, cleaned down, and got changed out of my staff uniform. I waved goodbye to the last kitchen hand as I walked out the door and into the night. My house was only a couple of blocks away, so every night I walked to save gas. I had only walked for about 5 minutes when a loud whistle startled me. I looked off into the direction it came from and froze in fear. It was the same guy from the restaurant. He was on the opposite side of the street, signaling for me to come over with a large grin on his face. I took a pause before my instincts kicked in, and I started to quickly walk away. My house was still about 10 minutes away, and I could feel him getting closer with every step. Terrifying thoughts were racing around in my head, knowing very well that this could end badly. I turned the corner and started to sprint down the footpath. I felt tears gather up in my eyes as loud footsteps followed closely behind me. I didn't look behind out of fear, when all of a sudden a hand firmly grabbed my shoulder and yanked me backwards. I turned to see the man. His face was red, and his grin had morphed into a furious expression. He put his finger up to his lips. "Don't scream or I'll cut you," he whispered. At this point, I was ready to accept my fate, when out of nowhere, I felt a sudden burst of rage explode inside of me. I grabbed his face and dug my nails deep into his eyes. The man let out a loud, horrible noise as he clenched his face in pain. I took this chance and made a run for it. I ran all the way back to my flat, and after struggling to put the key in the door, I managed to get inside. As soon as I shut the door, I collapsed down onto the ground out of exhaustion and started to cry. My roommates all rushed down the stairs to see if I was okay. After walking me to a couch, I explained what happened. They were all shocked, whilst at the same time happy to see that I escaped from the man. I rang up the restaurant and quit the next day. It was a shame, really. The owners were so kind, and I really didn't mind the place. But I was too terrified to return, knowing that that man could be waiting for me. I've started back at college now, and I'm slowly recovering from that incident. Sometimes I do get nightmares just thinking about what may have happened if I hadn't attacked that man like I did. I was 19 and strapped for cash, so I temporarily took a second job working as a waitress at a diner. It was open till 3 a.m. on weeknights and 24 hours on the weekends. On the weekends, it was always a bunch of drunk kids at night that would come after they left the bars. During the week, most people that came late night were people working overnight shifts or just getting off from work. I would do the overnight shifts twice a week. Anything more than that, I probably would have passed out from a lack of sleep. I'd be the only server past 10 o'clock on the weekdays because there wasn't an abundance of customers, especially at the later hours of the night. One night, a larger man came in alone, around like 1 a.m. There was only one other customer in the restaurant at the time, I believe. I seated him. He started talking to me in a flirtatious way right away. It was always the older, unattractive ones that would be the most flirty. I had to deal with it with a smile though, as I basically was working on tips. He ordered a burger and a milkshake. Then he told me his name, Trevor. Trevor would keep staring at me from across the diner as I would be sitting doing things on my phone. He was the only customer left at this point now. He called me by my name over to the table. I went over with a smile and he asked for the check. He left after paying, and when I went to collect the tip and clean the table, I noticed along with the $5 tip, he left his number and a winking face on the bill. Gross. I crumpled it up and threw it away. I thought that was the end of Trevor and I's story, but it wasn't. A few nights later, in came Trevor again, super late at night when no one else was in the place. I greeted him and sat him to a table. He actually hit me with a "how is my favorite server doing tonight?" which was odd considering I only served him one time. He again started some conversation with me, and I was way too exhausted for this, but I had to put a smile on my face and entertain it. I thought maybe this time he'd give a better tip if I acted interested, but that backfired because he mistook my friendliness as interest and invited me to come on his boat sometime. I asked what kind of boat it is to play along, and he showed me a picture of this tiny little thing that could barely fit 2 people based on the looks of it. I said, "Oh wow, my dad has a boat too." I should have said boyfriend looking back now, but I was trying to get a good tip out of him. He asked for my number, and I told him I'm not allowed to give customers my number. I could get fired. He actually believed this, but after he left, he once again left his number on the bill, this time with a note saying something along the lines of, "I bet you were just shy last time. Don't be shy this time, you can text me. It'll be our little secret," followed by another winking face. He again only tipped $5. This guy was a creep who didn't even tip well. I hope to not see him again. But this wouldn't be a story if I didn't. He came in the next week on another night I was working. It had to be like 2 a.m., and it seemed like he'd always come in right as the place would become empty. Almost like he was sitting in the parking lot, waiting to come when I wouldn't be serving any tables. This time he came in, and the first thing he said was, "You don't call her, right?" But he didn't say it with a smile, he said it with a serious face. I told him I'm really flattered, but I really can't text customers. He didn't say anything, he just walked out. I was relieved, honestly. I'd rather he just stop coming in. The next day, while at my other job, I got a text from one of the other waitresses asking if I knew who the fat bald guy was. I said, "Yeah, he's so creepy. Why?" She told me that he asked for my full name. I asked her if she gave it to him, and she said yes. I was honestly really upset, and this made me uncomfortable. She said that he claimed he just wanted the name of the really amazing waitress from last night. Later that day, I got a text. It was from Trevor. He said, "Hey, it's Trevor, your favorite customer. I know you said you can't give your number out, so I took it upon myself to get it myself. Now you didn't break any rules, haha." I was at a loss for words. I blocked the number and hoped that would be the end of it. But later that week, after I got off from work, I found an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. I grabbed it and got in my car. Its contents were disturbing. It was a bunch of pictures of me in the diner, taken from the parking lot. The pictures got more disturbing though, when they started being of my apartment and of me standing on my front deck or unlocking the front door. Most disturbing of all was a picture taken through the front window at night. I drove straight to the police precinct with the photos to report this. These pictures, accompanied with the text I received from him, was damning enough. I stayed at my parents' house that night, and the next day, a detective called that Trevor guy and told him if he continued to contact me, it would be considered harassment and he would be arrested. I still quit the job at the restaurant just to be safe. My lease was up the next month, and so I moved to a new apartment. I didn't want to have any chance of that man finding me again. He He was the first and only true stalker I've ever dealt with in my life. Snapchat has become a staple in today's social media world. It's a convenient way to contact friends and keep in touch with people. But as we've seen over and over on this channel, there can be a few privacy concerns if you're not careful. Let's just jump right into it and look at 3 disturbing snaps people have received and their backstories. For the sake of the person who sent me this, I'll refer to her as Maria. Maria has an Instagram account with 5,000 followers, which is a decent amount, and so she gets a good amount of attention on her profile from men. Maria has a boyfriend who has not appeared in any pictures of hers on her Instagram. Maria also had her Snapchat username in her Instagram bio, something a lot of people do to allow their acquaintances and friends to add them on the app with ease. This can also open the door to unwanted contact though. Although she didn't add everybody back who added her on Snap, she at one point had her privacy settings set to allow all people to send her messages and snaps, even people she didn't add back. So, somewhat often she'd receive messages and snaps from random guys, usually guys that followed her on Instagram. In her words, often older and creepy looking. But according to her, even younger guys managed to look creepy by taking weird angled selfies in dark rooms. Usually the snaps were pretty harmless like this, but one day she received a snap that would lead to her getting the police involved. Maria lives with her family, but often stays at her boyfriend's first-floor apartment. This location is not known to anybody except for her close friends who know of her boyfriend, making it all the more disturbing when she received this snap. It was a picture taken through the window to her boyfriend's bedroom. At the time the photo was taken, it's hard to see it in the dark, but Maria was in the bed napping, and her boyfriend was in the living room watching football. There was no caption to the Snapchat, making it appear to be some kind of subtle threat. Maria didn't open the snap until much later in the night while going through snaps she'd received from various people she didn't know. By this time, it was a couple hours after the snap had been sent. She panicked and screenshotted the snap and showed it to her boyfriend. From here, he replied to the account on her phone, asking who is this. Upon adding the person back, they saw the account had a pretty high snap score, which for those of you who may not know, a person's snap score represents how many times they have received or sent a snap. This account having a snap score in the 50,000 range meant it wasn't likely just a random spam account. The person replied, "John, LOL." Maria's boyfriend replied back, "We're calling the police," and John replied, "K cool, let me know if you need help calling them." After this, the account blocked her, and the couple were left to wonder who this person was. A search through Maria's Instagram followers turned up multiple Johns, but with no last name on the account, it would simply be a guess as to who it could be. That same night, as the couple was sleeping, a crash from the living room woke them up. As Maria's boyfriend ran to check the source of the noise, he found it was the dining room window, which had been shattered, and on the floor was a house brick, presumed to have been taken from a house being renovated down the block. If the couple didn't have a case before, they definitely did now, and they called 911 to report the incident. Now that a police report had been made, police would subpoena Snapchat for information on this person's account in hopes to locate the person. The couple was assigned a detective to their case who was supposed to help in identifying the mystery person. However, as the days turned into weeks, little to no information was given. It did become apparent, however, that the Snapchat account had been either deleted or banned because it no longer came up under search results. Currently, Maria and her boyfriend have no idea who this person was, and any thought of it being a prank by a friend was out the window when their window was literally shattered by a brick. It can boil down to a stalker being jealous of her boyfriend, but this would also mean that Maria was followed to her boyfriend's house, and that the perpetrator would know where she lives as well. Luckily, with security cameras becoming more prevalent on houses, these kinds of crimes are becoming more difficult to get away with. But in cases like this, where there's an absence of any cameras, unfortunately people may still be able to pull these kinds of crimes off. 3 months later, and Maria and her boyfriend haven't seen any new activity at either of their homes. This next story comes from a college student named Tom from the University of Kentucky. Tom shares his location on the SnapMap feature, which if you've been around my channel for a while, you know how things can sometimes turn out with that. Tom lives in a house off campus with 4 friends in a downtown area by a bunch of bars. The squad of guys often walk to and from these bars at night on the weekends. The night in question was no exception. Tom was on his way home from a nearby college bar, about a 15-minute walk from the house. At some point while walking home, he was on a quiet residential street with woods on one side, and he heard someone walking behind him. He turned to see a man holding out something in front of him, walking about 10 meters behind him. He couldn't tell what he was holding, but he didn't stare for too long because he didn't want to draw negative attention to himself. He noted that something about the sight of the man seemed ominous, though. The man was behind Tom for a while, until he turned to the block with his house on it. At some point before making it back, the man was no longer behind him, at least not that he thought. It was only after he made it back inside the house that he got a notification that he received a snap from his friend Luke, one of his housemates, who was home at the time. Luke had lost his phone that night though, so receiving a snap from his Snapchat account meant that somebody had his phone. Tom called his housemates downstairs before opening the video. He also turned a screen recorder on to capture the snap, and this is what they saw. The snap was a video of Tom walking down the street towards his house. It was the man he had seen walking behind him, and what he was holding out in front of him was apparently Luke's phone. They had the idea to check the location of Luke's phone on the snap map, since he had his location enabled, as did Tom. The location of his Bitmoji was last updated 9 minutes ago, and its location was right on top of their house. So the three guys who were currently home ran around the entire property with all the outside lights on to light up the area. They didn't find the man with the phone, but oddly enough, Luke's Bitmoji moved just a tad as it updated again, yet it was still on top of the house, meaning whoever had the phone had to be somewhere that they were overlooking. After a while, the guys thought to lock the phone using the Find My iPhone feature, and then have it play a sound. When they did this, they were confused to hear the beeping sound of the phone coming from inside the house, followed by stomping of someone's shoes and the front door slamming shut. Luke's beeping phone was still inside the house, but instead of going straight for that, the three guys ran outside to chase after whoever just ran out the front door. By the time they made it out onto the street, they had no idea which way the person went. They were out of sight and they could have been hiding anywhere. After checking the neighbors' yards, the guys went back inside to retrieve Luke's beeping phone, and Tom claims they found it right in the pantry closet, meaning the man was hiding in there for however long. At first, one could have maybe assumed that the person who had the phone was trying to return it, until it was discovered that that person was literally hiding in their house. Assuming all the details in the story are true, if I had to guess, the man who had stolen Luke's phone knew who he was somehow and was following Tom through his SnapMap Bitmoji location all the way up to their house. There are some missing details though, like how the phone was stolen, what the method of entry to the house was, and if Luke and the rest of the guys in the house had any sort of enemies or people out to get them. No police action was taken apparently. In 2015, an Australian Redditor with username Skinna555 took 3 Snapchat videos of his parents' exotic birds and put them on a Snapchat story. What followed next was downright disturbing. Skinna and his girlfriend recently moved into his childhood home with his parents while their own house was being built. Skinna's parents owned 3 Australian parrots, and one night while he was home alone, he uploaded 3 Snapchat stories showing off the birds, since many people always asked about the birds.
Right, so the first one of my parents' little birds is this little guy. It is little Leo. He's a cockatiel. The second little bird of my parents is a rainbow lorikeet. His name is Oliver. And there he is. And here I am with my good little mate, Puffin.
About 15 minutes after uploading the videos to his story, Skinna receives a text from one of his friends, and at the bottom of it, it says, "By the way, what was that in the window behind you in the last one?" So after seeing this text, he went to rewatch the clips a couple of times and opened them on his computer to get a larger and clearer view of the videos. In the last snap, it almost appears as if someone is at the door, looking in with their hands cupped against it. But it's hard to say for sure because of how briefly the door is in the frame. But whatever it was not in the first snap when that same door was in full frame. Skinner was home alone at the time, and to add to the mystery, that door led to the backyard, which was only accessible through a single gate which had been locked. The theory that it might have been a reflection doesn't hold up, because the sliding glass door was half open, and all that stood between the figure and the inside of the room was the fly screen door, which would not have been able to cast any reflections. Whatever was at that door moved in the matter of seconds that passed between the first and third snap. When Skinner was a young child, around 10, he started to commonly experience sleep paralysis, which could get so intense that he'd find himself often not being able to breathe for short periods of time. And this led to a fear of sleeping for him. A couple years went by, and his sleep paralysis tendencies would worsen. During his episodes, he could not move, and felt like something that meant him harm was in the room with him. Around the age of 14, he started to hear and see things like thuds and creaks. However, he always had one recurring vision, a faceless person looking in his bedroom window with their hands cupped up to the glass, similar to this image caught in his Snap story. When he moved out at age 18, he never had another episode. So for a few days after these snaps, nothing happens. But come Friday night, Skinner found himself home alone again. At around 10:15 p.m., while playing games on Steam with his friends, he starts to hear some relatively loud banging, loud enough that he could hear it even through his headset. It was coming from the screen door outside. He got up to film the sounds using his phone. The noises got louder and more frequent. Instead of outright opening the curtains and potentially finding himself face to face with someone on the other side, he walked through the kitchen into the laundry room to turn on the outside lights. Like I mentioned earlier, there's only one entry and exit to the backyard, the left side of the house through a locked gate. So with the back lights now on, he went over to a window that looks out to that one exit of the backyard. While waiting and expecting to see someone rushing out of the yard, a loud noise can be heard from outside on the opposite side of the house. He aims the camera at the window for a few moments, then turns on the kitchen lights, and seconds later stops recording. What the fuck, man? He kept all the lights on until his parents returned home. He uploaded the videos to Reddit, and people started to help in examining the videos. After a few Redditors enhanced the videos, a big mass in the corner was revealed in the dining room. The figure begins to resemble a person. And to make it creepier, that figure is not there at the end of the video. Skinner called the police, and the video freaked even them out. They believed that a two-man team tried to rob his parents while they were away. Theoretically, when one would-be robber broke in and realized Skinner was home, the second one tried to make noise to lure him inside. And when it didn't work, he snuck out and escaped. Skinner doesn't entirely trust this theory, mainly because all the doors and windows were locked from the inside when they came in. So how exactly would these guys have gotten in? Years later, this just remains to be another internet mystery, and what actually went down, we may never know.
This experience happened many years ago. I'm 23 now, but I grew up a scout. I started with the Cub Scouts, then transitioned to the Boy Scouts, and eventually earned the accomplishment of becoming an Eagle Scout. Throughout my years as a scout, I've been on countless campouts. Many friends came and went as kids quit the Scouts throughout the years. But one friend who stuck it through the whole way with me was Justin. Me and Justin were in the same grade, and we were close friends. At the time of this experience, we were both going to be entering 10th grade, 15 years old. As weird as it sounds, I honestly don't even remember what park we were camping out at. It was just too long ago. As soon as everybody had arrived, Scoutmaster Davis led the group on our hike to the campsite. After setting up our tents and having a quick snack, Scoutmaster Davis led us on another hike as the sun was starting to set. He liked to take us on hikes in the dark, as he thought it taught good directional skills. On the way back, we had to use our flashlights since it was getting too dark. Mr. Davis played a little game to mess with the younger kids, acting like we were lost and they had to find the way back. He had one of the younger kids start to lead the way back, but the kid soon froze in his tracks and looked to Mr. Davis, claiming he heard something. Mr. Davis acted all forest rangery, stepping forward and making a listening motion. Me and Justin laughed out loud, and he shushed us. There was another sound, a very obvious step from a larger creature in the distance. Kids were shining their flashlights all over the place. Mr. Davis assured us it's okay as long as we make a lot of noise to keep any potential predators away. I gotta admit, it was a bit scary hearing him say that. Mr. Davis led the way back from there on out, but on several occasions, either me, Justin, or some other kid would point out steps coming from behind us. Clearly something was following us. Mr. Davis told us to just stay with the group and not to refrain from making noise. We got back to the campsite where we cooked a couple turkeys, popped open a few cans of corn, and then sat around the campfire where Mr. Davis began telling his famous stories. However, it was interrupted by footsteps circling around the campfire. Scouts started turning around looking into the woods. Even the scoutmasters looked at each other. Assistant Scoutmaster Roberts hopped up, said, "Alright, this'll scare him off," and went for the gun in his tent. He pulled out his rifle and fired a shot into the air. We didn't hear any more footsteps after that. After a whole hour of listening to Mr. Davis's stories, scouts started heading to their tents. Me and Justin were in the same tent, and knowing how early the scoutmasters made us get up, we didn't really joke around for too long. The only sounds now were the crickets and the crackling of the fire outside. I fell asleep quickly, given how exhausted I was from all the hiking, but woke up to Justin nudging me. When my senses came to, I listened, and heard footsteps coming from outside the tent. The campfire was still lit outside, and it created a glow on the tent walls. But it also allowed us to see the shadow outline of what was outside. A person. I whispered, "So what, it's probably someone just going to take a piss." He told me to open the zipper and peek outside. I did what he said, and to my horror, there was some heavy-built man with a sack over his head and a ripped working shirt, very clearly holding a big knife. He was walking around some of the other tents. I zipped the opening back up and told Justin to be quiet. We had no phones or anything, so we couldn't call one of the scoutmasters. All we could do was wait. We couldn't tell if or when the man had left. We just sat there for what felt like hours, waiting, and eventually we fell asleep. We awoke to one of the scoutmasters blowing that stupid wake-up horn. Me and Justin were surprised that we even fell asleep given the situation, but we immediately went to go tell our scoutmasters what we saw. All three of them took our claims very seriously and wanted to make sure we weren't joking. They had no choice but to tell everyone to pack up and call their parents to get a ride home within 3 hours. Now this is the really weird part. Two of the younger kids in the group had their entire bag stolen, which mainly contained their clothing. When the scoutmasters went to investigate around their tents, we were all disturbed to see that there had been tiny holes carved into the tents, big enough for someone to look into. And that's exactly what the holes were for. The scoutmasters reported the incident to the town in which the park resides. It still horrifies me, given how real the situation was for me, that somebody literally followed us into the middle of the woods, spied on two 11 or 12-year-old kids while they slept, stole their clothes, and did whatever else. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the incident overall hurt the group, as some parents refused to allow their kids to go on any more campouts. It's sad that some sick people out there can really ruin things for a lot of other people. I'm a 15-year-old Boy Scout from Houston, Texas. My troop flew us out to Denver, Colorado, and we drove to a camp called Camp Alexander, about 45 minutes away from Colorado Springs. Me and 4 other people in our troop were participating in the high adventure program that the camp offers. This basically means that we were doing things like climbing mountains and white water rafting. 4 days into our trip and nothing has happened to us. We set up our tents next to the Arkansas River, as we would be rafting in it the next day. I sleep very poorly in sleeping bags, and had been waking up covered in sweat every night, and that night was no different. I woke up with my face in a puddle of drool and sweating all over my body. I checked my watch and it was around 3:45 a.m. I decided that it would be best for me to step out of my tent for a while and cool down. I put on a shirt and shorts and unzipped my tent. The way my tent was positioned, the opening was facing towards the river, and I immediately noticed that there was someone standing in the middle of the river facing downstream. The water was about waist high and 30 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and whoever was standing in there didn't have a shirt on, so I was extremely confused. After a moment of staring, I realized that I knew this person. He was my friend, who I'll be referring to as Dalton for privacy reasons. I called out for him 2 times before he finally moved. He looked right at me, and then he looked around as if he were processing the situation. He yelled at me, "What the fuck?" He ran back to the shore as fast as he could. I grabbed him a towel and shirt and asked him what the hell he was doing in the middle of the river at 4 a.m. He answered saying that he didn't know and that he had just woken up to me yelling at him in the middle of the river. I don't know how he got there or if he sleepwalked or something like that, but it was seriously creepy. Nobody believed us in the morning and we just decided to forget about it. Dalton said he had never sleepwalked before or anything like that, so I have no idea why or how he would have gotten into that river. All I know is if I didn't wake up that night and get out of the tents, my friend Dalton might have been dead come morning time. This is going to be a brief, horrifying 100% true story of mine. I was 13 years old and one of the quieter kids in my Boy Scout troop. I'm not totally a shy person, but I couldn't really relate to any of the kids in my Boy Scout group. We were on our last campout of the 2008 camping season. It was in October and it was a little chilly, making our many hikes a little more bearable. This was the last campout of my life, and you'll soon know why. During one of our hikes, I was trailing behind the group as I usually did. I had this sudden urge to pee, so I let the group get a little further ahead and then went behind a tree. I almost had a heart attack as something made a heavy thud on the ground not too far away from me. It didn't sound like a stick or branch falling, it sounded like something putting its foot down into the leaves. I didn't know what to think, all I know is I was freaked out. I ran to catch up to the group. I had no idea what just happened, so I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I'll skip ahead to that night when I was trying to fall asleep. I had my own tent, as did some of the other kids in our tiny little troop, so I tried to go to sleep right away. A strange noise soon interrupted the silence, however. It sounded like breathing coming from a phone or something, and it seemed to be coming from inside my bag. After digging through my bag, I pulled out a big, heavy walkie-talkie. The only thing, I didn't bring or own that. Suddenly, in a deep, almost muffled voice, someone said into the walkie-talkie,
"I'm watching you, kid."
I pressed down the talk button and said, "Who is this?" One of the other kids were clearly pranking me. There was no response, only this sudden static. "Is this Mike?" There was silence. And then,
"I'm right outside your tent."
the fabric of the tent suddenly started pushing in on me as something from outside was pushing into it. I screamed like a baby, and that's when whoever was outside ran into the woods. 2 of my scoutmasters came rushing into the tent. I could barely even breathe, but I somehow managed to show them the walkie-talkie and explain what just happened. They lectured the kids for a few minutes, thinking it was one of them messing with me, but when I calmed down, I stepped in and told them that the voice was way too deep for it to have been any of them. We were all forced to share tents with 2 others that night, and the next day we packed up and moved to a nearby campsite with another Boy Scout troop. I really don't know what they did with the walkie-talkie. I was emotionally disturbed, embarrassed, and I just wanted to go home. I convinced my parents to let me quit Boy Scouts after that incident. It was by far the scariest experience of my life.